I'm Matt Carpenter.
And I'm Peg Keough.
Welcome to the College Podcast. We are going to be your ultimate guides in helping you figure out how to navigate this maze in such a way that you don't lose your minds or your wallets. Let's get started. Hi, Peg.
Hey, buddy. How's it going?
It's going good. We had a adventurous morning. We get to see Emma play a little tenor saxophone. It's Mardi Gras today. The Saints go marching in, and
nice.
This land is your land. So a couple bangers.
Beautiful.
They did a pretty good job. I gotta tell you, 10-year-old.
I remember those days. That's fun. That's
only,
fun.
Only tenor sax in school. It's bigger than she is, but you know.
She chose that? That was her? Her?
The music teacher is like, you sure this is okay? We're like, I don't know. You tell us. And he's like, I've never seen it done before for a person that little. I don't know. I think she just liked the look of it. Like, we got it done.
Nice. Yeah. Super fun. Good way to start the day.
Good Good vibes, good juju. Erica's youth. It's good. It's refreshing. Okay. To the tasks at hand, as predicted, still plenty to talk about. Maybe no massive development since last week, but still things are coming out hot and heavy here. I quickly want to talk about, I think a good place to start, and this was kind of your call this week, and it'll be a focus of our presentation on Thursday, is, what has happened so far? Let's just get clear on that. So we're going to start there. We're going to talk about kind of the official hire of Linda McMahon as the new Secretary of the Department of Education. We're going to talk about this. It's certainly related to some of the things that we know already, this trend or just kind of more evidence of specifically the student parent loan place becoming more privatized. And even if there is federal options, why we think the private sector is going to just have more market share this year and what we can do about that. And really how important it is, right? And we'll give just an actual example that, to me, I hope just, helps people understand, even if we're borrowing at a difference of 1%, 2%, 3%, it can just be so impactful, right? And so we need to understand that now. I don't care if we're a senior, if we're in college, or if we're an underclassman. There's things we can do now, right, to help ourselves out. And then we can kind of, again, we'll leave you like we usually try to leave you, which is, okay, I just learned a couple of things. What do I do about it, right? What are your action items? So, Peggy, let me just kind of rattle off, what we know, what has actually happened to date, and let's just kind of get your commentary on a couple of things. So we know the Department of Education, they have already laid people off, will continue laying people off with the stated goal of closing it down altogether.
I will add in there that needs to be an act of Congress. So the Trump administration cannot shut down the Department of Education. So just keep that in mind if that's causing a lot of anxiety. So there is a bit, checks and balances there. They can reduce the size of the department, and they are actively doing that. And we can talk about how that affects your experience as a parent with college-bound kids as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call. The appeals court has blocked the Biden administration SAVE program, which is a repayment program for federal loans, parent and student loans. Currently, there are 8 million borrowers that are enrolled in that program. So we're talking about a significant amount of people that thing has been paused at a minimum, in addition to the IDR, which is the income-driven repayment plan. Same deal. This is impacting a ton of borrowers, millions of borrowers. And the long and the short of both of those plans is to minimize the amount of the monthly payments, right? So maybe there's a longer repayment period, but the idea is just to help people to be able to manage their monthly cash flow. So even though they have these, significant amount of loans in many cases, it's not something that is, completely preventing them from doing anything else, right, in their lives. So that's meaningful. Talking about a ton of people there. And
it can be linked to what you make is the idea. So people that get out and have a low paying job. And so all of those applications are completely halted at this point.
I mean, and I'll just kind of pause there, because the last, I guess, kind of comment is that this, and you kind of said it, it all points to folks that are enrolled in those plans currently, probably their monthly payments are going to go up. We don't know what the resolution is, but that's all signs are pointing to that, in my opinion. But, any of those things you just kind of want to layer on, any more commentary, whether it's the repayment plans or the reduction of the Department of Education in terms of personnel?
Yeah, so the reduction of the personnel, like they made a lot of they built up the department last year because the 24-25 FAFSA wasn't the rollout was not good, so they brought in some outside people, did much better for this current year, the 25-26 FAFSA. A big thing was beefing up people that would answer the helpline, just having more personnel to handle all this, and it was markedly better, much better this year. Well, you most likely will see those things go away. And so that's difficult when you're trying as a parent to navigate all this stuff, 2 financial aid forms, the FAFSA being the main one. Department of Ed owns that whole process. Less people, seasoned people. I just read, I forget, her last name is Carr. She's been with the department for 30 years. She's been put on a leave of absence, not her choice, obviously. And she's been around for 30 years, very respected, keeps track of what happens there and reporting on it. So there's big changes going on there with reducing the size of the department, basically, which the Trump administration can do to a certain extent. They can't eliminate it, but they can. So for all of you parents that are listening, if you've ever called the helpline or interacted with the Department of Ed, it's probably going to be more difficult. There's just less people to help consumers, basically.
And I know you've been on the phone a million times with the Department of Education for a variety of different reasons, right? What's your experience been kind of before this, I guess what we're going to see, we think it's going to get worse on the surface. Again, if you have less people and there's going to be some turnover and things like this, I don't see a jump up, I guess, in customer service and the kind of quality of person you're going to get on that's going to be answering those phone calls. But what's your experience been even before this stuff?
Yeah, my experience, full disclosure, but you and I aren't the people that they're dealing with. But through the years when I used to call, I felt like I was educating the person I was talking to, but we're experts in the field, right, Matt? So I realized, okay, this isn't a place to turn, and I would usually guide the families I was talking to. But as part of this 25-26, I never have called this past year because I don't need to, but they started keeping track of the metrics of how, people got surveys. Were you pleased when you called? How quickly was your problem resolved? And then the stats were phenomenal. So they, which I loved, that they were actually tracking their metrics and being transparent about, are we achieving the goals that we set out? And they did. So what they did in the 25-26 rollout, according to their stats, was just way better. I don't have personal experience with calling them and seeing what the wait time was and chatting with anybody, just because you and I don't need to do that, right? So it's not really fair for me to base it on the last decade plus before the new rollout, I don't think. And I love that they were tracking it. They were trying to be transparent about, are we doing better? These are the numbers. So the numbers were pretty phenomenal about how many calls they were accepting, how quickly they got through them, and the resolution rates.
That's good to hear. Because my personal experience has been, and this is not a knock on any of the individuals I've talked to, because I just think it's, you know as well as I do, this is a complicated, complex process, and there's so many different every college is different and every family dynamic is different, and I think the hope and the expectation for a lot of parents is, when I call the Department of Education, this is the backstop. I am going to get an expert, and any of my questions are going to be answered. And these, again, I'm sure there's exceptions and there's some thoroughbreds in there somewhere, but I think a lot of people answering these phones, the amount of training that they've had across our whole kind of college ecosystem is just limited, right? It's not a knock on them. It's
not their job to be college planning experts. And many of the questions that people call with, I'm 100% sure, are college questions, or they're questions to ask professionals like you and I. That's just the bottom line. They're not questions to ask FAFSA.
That's right.
It's not, but parents don't, and no knock on parents. It's confusing, and there's all these entities. They just don't know that. So it's like, wow, like to your point, it seems logical to call them, but that's not really the place to turn, at any point.
I'll add something in there too. I've had so many school counselors, guidance counselors, right, that kind of follow along with us and are turned to us for their education and things like this, but they're at a school, for example, that it says in their bylaws or whatever, they can't work with any type of for-profit company, or they can't quote unquote endorse a for-profit company. So they can only send their parents to the Department of Education or maybe the state agency, right? MIFA here in Massachusetts, HESA down in New Jersey, et cetera, et cetera. Just about every state has one. But I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many times where school counselors say, look, I can only send my parents to these two places, but my kids are going through this right now, and I need some real answers. Can I ask you? Right? Like, I wish I could send my parents to you. We're kind of not allowed to, but again, if they really, as parents, they know that they're going to have to come to us with these types of questions, right? Because I always used to say, if you have a question, right, to families, and it's a gray area, and you hope the Department of Education rules on it one way or the other, and you want to find out, I said, just call 2 or 3 times. I promise you're going to get a different answer from everybody you talk to, and wait till you get the one that you're looking for, type of deal, right? And that has been my experience. I've got this asking the same question just to, basically frontline market research to see the variety of answers I get, and it's fairly alarming.
Yeah, I think that this year with the rollout, if people were calling to say, hey, I don't have a social security number, how do I do this? That's what they're trained up on. Just the literal nuts and bolts of completing the form. And with all the changes, my guess is they were pretty well trained to handle that. There's just so much more to this than that, but that's my hope. And I think that's what most people were calling this past
100%.
year. But to our beginning point of what you asked me, less people, more hold time. It's not a priority for this administration to have this department at all. So there are going to be obvious ramifications here.
And all these parents that have questions like, and I know they get a lot of these questions, which, hey, I just completed my FAFSA and my SAI was $35,000. Does that mean that's what I'm going to pay? Does that mean, how much of these schools are actually, right? Those are usually some of the first questions that parents have. And then those are questions that I know the Department of Education these guys are just not suited to answer, right? I'm sure they have their company lines, but I don't know how impactful they are.
Well, and it's not an appropriate question for them, honestly. It's just not, No,
that's totally fair. Totally fair. And again, we're just got to make sure that parents know that there's more, resources out there, right? That's not the backstop for those types of questions. Okay. Anything else you want to add, Peggy, in terms of what has happened, what we know? Okay. So the next thing to kind of hit on here, Linda McMahon named the Secretary of the Department of Education. She was with before their previous.
Wait, was it an educational institution she was with? Does she have a background in education?
No, it was they did cross career paths earlier. Actually, even before she was the administrator of the SBA, the Small Business Administration, in Trump's previous term. She did not do all 4 years there. She actually left kind of in the middle of that to go back to the private sector. But anyways, she is back. Any commentary around that before I add my 2 cents?
She, from what I've read, she has the agenda. She has Trump's agenda, the elimination of the department. There's a big push to get things pushed out to the states to make decisions individually versus the federal government. Any sort of what they perceive as left-wing ideas they want to push out, she was nominated and went through, voted mostly, by party vote. She's got Trump's agenda, obviously. So it's all of that sort of stuff, push it to the states. We don't even maybe need this department. And we can talk about all of that stuff. But yeah, that's kind of her agenda. What I was joking and pushing at, you didn't hit, but she's got a background with, what is it, the World Wrestling Federation?
Oh, buddy, I'm going there, buddy. Don't worry.
Yeah, okay, because she's not, not that you have to be a seasoned educator to be in that position, but it would be helpful to have some sort of background. There's always been this talk around opening up the whole charter school voucher piece as well, making that more prominent.
And I think a line that you keep seeing here repeatedly in kind of anything that they put out is that just removing the federal government from education, specifically higher education, that's a pretty broad statement, right? Where we don't have all the details. What exactly does that
I mean, the
vision entail?
FAFSA is a federal document, and they would make, I mean, how can that be a state document? That's for our listeners, I mean, that's the overriding form that most schools, except for about 250 in this country out of thousands, use to give out federal aid to all these families. Huge percentage of families, well over 50%, get it. So that's a federal program. That's not a state program. Can you imagine, Matt? Like saying, okay, Iowa has their form. And I mean, it's already super confusing. That's just, we have 50 states, obviously. That's crazy,
Unless they're thinking that they're seeing something that we're not, I just don't see that coming into play, right? Unless there's somebody in that room with more experience than you and I that is seeing blind spots that we are not. I don't see that as a possibility. But I'll tell you what, it's like I can't help but like smile, laugh, whatever you want to say with some of this stuff where it's just like I'm like, am I? More and more people talking about the simulation. I'm like, is this a simulation? I mean, it's like I used to love the WE Peggy, and I still pay attention, like a little bit. And I'm like, this, love him or hate him, right? Donald Trump is one of the most successful reality TV stars ever, right? Since reality TV was a thing, that I think that's just like undeniable. In my opinion, the presidential campaigns have become basically reality TV, so he's incredibly effective, right? He is a seasoned, polished veteran when it comes to reality TV, and I think that has a ton to do with him, winning 2 presidencies. But to be on, because when he was doing wrestling things, he would go against Vince McMahon. They have some things where he's not knocking Vince McMahon out. Linda McMahon is in some of these things, because Trump's had more than one stint, with the WWE for some of these matches, right? So it's like,
see, I didn't even pay attention to. You're educating me now, because that is not something I would ever pay attention to. But
of course, right?
Not super surprising, but yeah.
Of course,
okay.
Why would you? But it's just kind of like, like 10 years ago, and I'm sure that's not on the nose. They're in an arena wrestling, entertaining, 30,000 people on Monday Night Raw and however many millions wrestling, and now they're in the White House. It's just kind of hard to believe, and I don't know. To me, it even brings levity. I'm like, what the hell is happening here? Now, again, this is not like this is not it ain't broke, so don't fix it situation. Most people don't like how our higher education system is constructed at the moment, so I welcome the change, but it's very interesting to see where it goes. I don't know. Entertaining, I guess, is the word if we want to, again, kind of bring levity to it, because I know it's not a joke to a lot of people that are being negatively impacted at the moment, right? Are going to see their student loan payments go up.
Well, and you have a little one. You have one coming up here. You don't need this system completely. Yeah, I mean, there's issues in general in the government, but, you can address them without just blowing everything up.
Well, I mean, look, I think and of course I do, college will be here, assuming Emma goes that route before we know it, of course, but I am still rooted in the confidence of and we are going to control our destiny as a family, right? We're going to figure, and of course, easier said than done, right? I have a philosophy for how I want to approach college with her. Can I play it out? When it comes to game time, I hope so, but I don't know. I think I have the experience of being a fly on the walls for so many different households that's so valuable to me, where I've really got to see, all right, here's what works and here's what doesn't, right? And the short answer for what works is, number one, figure out where you are on this financial aid spectrum, which colleges are going to fit within my budget, and then let's try to go shopping there, right? And then really help her understand. I loved how my uncle did it, and I was actually at his kitchen table when he was having this conversation with my cousin. So he just said she got into the Mass resident, Providence and UMass, and Providence was going to be like double UMass, right? And he just said, here's what I'm willing to contribute. This is what I think is responsible. You can, if you want to go to Providence, which is going to be double, you're going to be responsible for the difference. I'm going to really help you understand what that means. And here's why I think it's not a great idea for a similar product and all that. And like, she ultimately was fully on board, had an amazing experience with UMass, amazing career and all that. And just something like that is what I want to do. Just be very educated with how to approach it and super transparent I hope with them.
And yeah, and I would say too, transparent, not at her age right now, but as, high school starts looming and even middle school. And to your point, if she is college bound, and some kids aren't, they belong in the trades, and that's awesome. That's how our economy runs. We need everybody in their sweet spot, but it's planning. Like I remember with my two, when the going was good in our household, we were socking away megabucks in lieu of taking trips, we didn't like eat bread and water, and I'm not pushing our priorities on others, but if it is a priority and education is a priority in your family for whatever reasons, you got to sacrifice a little bit with these price tags. You got to think about it, hitting high school and thinking about it. If you can't afford it, that's fine. Live your life, enjoy your life. But if the going's good and you have some extra money, you got to prioritize that, sock it away. You get compounding in the market. It's a win-win if you can pull that off. I mean, you've done it too, Matt, when we meet with families and there's a decent income and there's just nothing set aside. Well,
Sure.
These colleges, full rides are out there, but they're not super common, right? That's not the answer for most kids by any means. So, it's just like anything. You got to save. You got to save and prioritize if you can.
It's for a different podcast, Peggy, but we almost have the exact opposite philosophy. And I wouldn't necessarily coach my philosophy. I would more say do as I say, not as I do to families, but we'll talk about it because I think it's an interesting
that is a completely, when you start bringing that up, I just can't help myself, but it's probably a different podcast.
Maybe next week we'll hit on it because I think it's a healthy conversation just to hear a couple different ways that people are approaching it, right? Because we know people are approaching it different ways. And the thing I'll add to this is I think there's a difference. Like I've seen parents that have like freaked their kids out about the prices and just added to their anxiety of the whole thing, right? And just like so over the top. So there's a balance there, right? And then again, like I always talk about my parents didn't talk about it at all. So that was the opposite end of that spectrum. And that wasn't healthy. That definitely contributed to a lot of our shortcomings and my shortcomings. It's somewhere in the middle, right? Like most things of like, hey, let's just be real. This is the deal. And I'm not trying to freak you out. I'm just telling you how it is, right?
Well, and kids need to start learning about money and the realities of money. I mean, I've done junior achievement with first and second graders, and it's wants versus needs. I mean, it's to your point. You never want to stress kids. It's the appropriate conversation at their developmental level and their age. And that's for the parents to figure out, obviously, what's appropriate because they know their child's personality. Some kids can take a certain conversation, whereas another kid would be super anxious about it. So, there's not a one size fits all, but yeah, that's a
1,000%,
great
right? That's why
it
is so nuanced and there's a variety. And yeah, maybe if we don't have any big announcements, maybe next week we'll just kind of spend time riffing on that. But I do want to make sure that we talk about, again, this continued trend here of this. We're really going towards the privatization of student and parent loans, right? So there's still going to be, in all likelihood, the PLUS loans still going to exist this year. But basically, the federal government is saying, we don't think this is a good investment for us because most borrowers that take this, they don't pay us back here, right? So again, we are going to step away and let the private industry handle this and just, again, take more market share. This is really important because this means that, again, all options within the private student loan space, okay, are based on the credit of the co-signer and sometimes the student as well, okay, if they have credit, or worse, if they have negative credit, right? And you'd be surprised how frequent that can happen. But so you need to start, number one, just understand what your credit score now. Where are you at? Okay, where's your student at if they have a credit score? Because that is going to be a straight line to what rate you borrow at. And we've been looking at a couple different things lately, but we said if you borrow $100,000, okay, over the course of 4 years of college, that's not a huge number, everybody, guys, right? It costs, in Massachusetts, it's $40K if you live on campus to go to the in-state state school and you don't get financial aid, right? So $25,000 a year is not an insane number anymore. But if you borrow $100,000 and option, loan A is 7% and loan B is 9%. Okay, so a 2% swing there. Okay, it's a net difference of $40,000. So on $100,000 in 2% difference, you pay $40,000 more. Okay, more on a $100,000 loan. So we're going to keep sharing these statistics. Obviously, we are never of the fear-mongering mindset, but I want people to really, really pay attention because Peggy, people don't start thinking about loans until they see the bill and it's due.
Right, later on in senior year, and then you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place at that point. And the other key thing is, I mean, it's not, I agree with you, plus loans aren't going anywhere right now. That could be something that could happen, and we'll continue to talk about that. But the great thing about federal loans, and I'm not a huge plus loan advocate, and we've talked about that, but the federal loans are fixed, right? The private loans are usually variable, which means interest rates tick up. Like the Fed kept interest rates level. We've got tariffs just hit up at midnight, right? That if you listen to economists, most economists are saying not going to be great for the economy. We could have inflation again. The minute there's inflation, rates aren't going down. So you've got what's called interest rate risk with private loans. If you want to lock it in as fixed, they're going to raise the interest rate because then they know they're taking on interest rate risk. So that was a huge thing about the federal government is they were taking on that risk. And so for somebody sleeping at night like myself, I'm not looking at the ceiling going, oh my gosh, interest rates just went up and my loans are, and you don't want that as a parent. That's just, your kids probably aren't going to do it because they don't really understand, but you will as a parent, so that there's just all these moving pieces to keep in mind. And the overriding thing is obviously try to borrow the least amount. So that's where you have to take a few steps back and say, how do we get there? How do we borrow less? Well, we have our you-know-what together. We understand how these things
It's our podcast, Peggy.
Okay, you have your shit together. With our help, we're here to guide you on this, right? Because you can have your shit together. You can. Like all this stuff about loan forgiveness, it's like, let's talk about why there even needs to be loan forgiveness. So many people have stepped in it and just don't step in it. Like there's ways to do that. And we'll keep talking about this every week, but that's what's so frustrating to me is let's really talk about the issue. The parents don't understand, and I'm not bashing parents. It's hard. There's so much to understand. Parents don't even know that experts exist in this place. They do to meet with their child and build a list. What kind of campus do you want? What do you want to study? If I had a buck map for every time somebody said, I didn't even know somebody did what you do and had your expertise, I'd be done. Like I'd be living in Maui watching my whales all day, right?
100%.
I mean, and that's something that's on us to keep getting it out there so that we can guide all of you, right? But you're not a victim is my point. You can be an active participant in this. And to Matt's point, sitting down and talking to your kids and laying all this out. So I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but that's what
I mean, look, we'll say it every week. We'll say it every time we have the opportunity to be on our soapbox. We have agency here. I kind of like that word. We're not victims. And again, we don't do the palms up.
You never want to be a victim across the board.
No,
yeah.
No, you have choices here. Okay. Lots of choices. Okay. Great choices. So let's put ourselves in a position to succeed. The last thing I'll just kind of drip on people, because again, I think this is something we're going to do consistently. It doesn't get talked about. It's not common knowledge that a decent amount of states, about 18 states, they have their own borrowing programs. Okay. 3 of them, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Iowa. Anybody, regardless of where you live and where you go to college, can borrow from these 3 states, but they don't get any national recognition, essentially, right? So a lot of people might not know that these state options could be their best option. So we always want to mention that. And Massachusetts and Rhode Island historically have always had fixed options as well. Iowa does not.
Which is awesome, because then it's analogous to the federal government, like I was talking about before.
Exactly. And I will shout out Iowa's private student loan program, because they are, in my experience, on the very short list of the most transparent. They say we take the best FICO score, and that's where that's what your rate is based off of. So between the cosigner, the student, whatever. So obviously it's usually the cosigner, i.e. Simple enough. That's where your rate comes from, because most of some of our frustrations with a lot of these lenders, they're a black box. So we never know why this one got 12% and this one got 7%, and on the surface seems to be a very comparable application. So that's because that makes our job harder, where we just try to talk these lenders to be like, guys, tell us how you do business so we can educate our families, and the ones that would do best to hook up with you are going to find you and we'll help them find you type of deal, right? And that's where we get pissed, quite frankly, with some of these lenders. They're like, nope, we're not telling you anything. And, and good luck to parents. If we market to them most creatively, we're going to get the business, even if we shouldn't be the best option for that family, right? So again, that's why we're always letting people know that there's other options besides even the private sector, i.e. the state program. Okay, Peggy, I know you got
Transparency is a wonderful thing and something to really respect from any entity. They're willing to be transparent. They'll get some loyalty from me big time. And if you don't like what you hear, it's not a good option for you, that's one thing. But lack of transparency, that should get your spidey sense up right away.
Couldn't agree more. All right, Peggy. Well, I got a feeling we'll have lots to talk about next week. And if we don't, we'll talk about how you should think about saving for college versus how you shouldn't think about saving for college. And we both have our personal stories to add to that.
I look forward to it as always, buddy.
All right. Bye.
All right. See you next time.